It's 8 o'clock. My name is Narayana Swami. I welcome you all to this meeting. I start the session with invocation mantras. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Ganana Tva Ganapatigam Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamasravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anastranvan Nodibisida Sadhanam Om Sri Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhirvajini Evati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Om Sri Mahasaraswati Namaha Triambagam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukami Vadantanan Mrityor Mukshi Amamritaat Om Sri Triambagamutinjaya Devadaye Namo Namaha Idam Vishnu Vijakrame Tredanidade Padam Samodamasya Bhagam Sure Krishna 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 Om Bhurбhuvassuvarom Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. This is lecture number 3. Today I will try to cover chapters 3 and 4. But before that, a few introductory remarks based on some of the key points that we discussed on the first 2 lectures that I want you to fully aware of, and I hope you are reading the question and answers provided. There are few questions that also these points that I am highlighting would reinforce the answers to this question. The first one, I want to start few points. There are 3 types of Veda mantras. Rik, it is written in English as R-I-K, sometimes R-K, Rik. Rik is a poetic verse. Poetic verse, usually it has a chandas, a meter, and the meter is normally 1 of 7, Gayatri, Ushni Ganishtabh, Brihadi Pankti, Tishtub Jagati, Chandagasi. There are 7 chandas we talk about almost every day in our Sandhyavandanam. So, Rik is a poetic verse. The second type of mantra is Yajus. Yajus is a prose mantra. It is a rhythmic prose, small sentences. The third type is Saman. Saman is a form of song, singing, Saman. There are only 3 types of mantras we have in all these 4 Vedas or 5 Vedas if you include the Krishna Yajurveda and Shukla Yajurveda separately. We have 5 Veda Samhitas. In all these 5 Veda Samhitas together, we have about slightly over 27,000 mantras. It's all described in chapter 8. I will cover this on 8th or 9th lecture. Some of these duplicate itself. In fact, Rig Veda has only Rig mantras. Rig Veda Samhita has only Rig mantras. Yajurveda Samhitas have Yajur mantras, mantras of the type Yajus and Rig. Many of the Rig mantras in Yajurveda occur in Rig Veda itself. There are some Rig Vedas that do not occur in, that are in Yajurveda. Sama Veda consists of most mantras are from Rig Veda. A few Rigs, it has almost 95% of the mantras in Sama Veda are Rig mantras. It is sung in a particular fashion that is called the Saman. Atharva Veda has mostly Rig mantras, some prose mantras also there. So the three mantra confusion, in my opinion, arises that the three mantra types, the number of Vedas is already 4 that we have. The second point I want to talk about is the Devas. The Rigveda Devas, they are supra-physical beings, not physical beings, supra-physical beings with consciousness, power, with consciousness, knowledge, and power. They can act from anywhere and transfer their psychological powers to anyone, anywhere. All Devas have full power of Tadegam as well as specialized psychological power. The Rigvedic Devas are not personifications of qualities. All these will come back in detailed discussion when I discuss chapter 7, where we spend time on the Devas. But I want this as points because some of these questions I had to respond, so that I wanted to reinforce. The next point I want to mention is Rigveda discusses cosmos, cosmic activities, cosmic energies, how human beings can tap these cosmic energies to improve themselves psychologically and to perform your tasks with all-round perfection. So Rigveda does not talk about ordinary life much. There are questions whether there were meat eating, or one of the questions was there. So I want to say Rigveda talks about the cosmic nature, how we can almost the how humans can get to a situation where they can receive these cosmic energies and improve themselves. The next point I want to say is Vedas do not separate material life and spiritual life. In fact, Vedas want all human beings to lead a happy, harmonious life with full enjoyment. But Vedas are also saying, lead a dharmic life and spiritualize your life, divinize your life. That is what we are going to see as we go to part 2, chapter 7 and all that. But for the time being, and in one of the questions I said that there is no mention of liberation or moksha in the Vedas. One of the attendees sent me an email, but the Trambaka mantra is part of the Rigveda, yes. So that talks about liberation. No, Trambaka mantra talks about Trambakam yame sugandha mrittivardhanam urvarukam iva bandhanan mukshiya mrityor mamadar. Mrityoho bandhanat mukshiya. The bondage of death. Mrityoho bandhanat mukshiya. Release me or slip off from that. How? Just like urvarukam iva, just like the cucumber that releases itself from its stalk. But ma amritat, please do not release me from immortality. Amrita means immortality. So Rigveda is for immortality. In fact, Rigveda says, by leading a life, divinized life, enjoying your full enjoyment, happy life, harmonious life, in a dharmic way, you rise in consciousness level and you reach the Parame Vyoman, which is the triple infinity or triple immortality. So Rigveda is not immortality. What I meant that there is no moksha or liberation is The Advaita Vedanta distinguishes between immortality and moksha. That concept is not there, which may be a later. That is what I meant. But please do not misunderstand that Rigveda does not talk about immortality. Rigveda provides a path for all human beings to lead a life happily, harmoniously, no separation of material life and spiritual life, married life, raise children, raise family, teach them dharmic values, bring them up. At the same time, divinize yourself, spiritualize yourself, so that the devas will work with you. And we'll come back to that in chapter 7. And the last item I want to say is that Veda Samhitas are a self-contained document. Sri Aurobindo says, any doubt when you read a Vedic passage that you get, you keep on meditating on that. The Vedas themselves will provide the answer. That's what Aurobindo's statement. So Vedas is a self-contained document. So these are some points. We will see this as we go along in the next classes. So with this, I will proceed to the discussion of chapter 3. And the chapter 3, there are the background. Every chapter I have provided I start every chapter with a background. That background will bring you up to what I cover in that chapter. In the first section, there are 3 sections. In the first sections, it talks about the spiritual and direct external meanings versus spiritual meanings. I have been saying from the first lecture that the difficulty to understand Vedas is that the direct or external meanings will not provide the full impact of the Veda mantra, and we will not understand fully. Not only we will not understand fully, we may even get the feeling, what is this mantra trying to say? It doesn't make much sense to me. And not only to a new reader, even experienced readers will say that simply leading. And that is true of most of our scriptural texts. Upanishad is the same case, unless the Bhashyas of Adi Shankara or the Vishishtadvaita Bhashya or Madhvacharya's Bhashya, unless you have the Bhashyas of those Acharyas, it would have been extremely difficult for the ordinary reader to understand. The spiritual meaning has got to be properly brought out. So we are going to study what are the spiritual meanings, what are the external meanings, what are the difference. And in section 3.2 talks about symbols and symbolism. And section 3.3, it generally discusses the difficulties to study and understand the Vedas. So I will start with the section 3.1. I encourage you to read on your own. The background section is an easy read. So I go to section 3.1. It talks about the external meanings and spiritual meanings. So just to get a flavor of what is the difference between external meaning and spiritual meaning, what if I don't know the spiritual meaning? What if I only know the external meaning? All those questions will be answered. To explain that, in chapter 3, I have taken 6 words. First word is Gau, go, Gau, and the various vibhakti in which that is go or Gau. Some most of you know Sanskrit. Those who do not know Sanskrit, most Indian people who know any of the Indian languages, most Indian languages have words from Sanskrit, so they will know. Gau means cow. Usually, go protection, go samrakshanam, go Gau, what they call is refers to a cow. That is the external word meaning. Aurobindo, spiritual word meaning, he gives ray of light or knowledge. Go has also that meaning. Of course, we won't spend too much time because I want you to get a flavor. Our goal is not to, you can study Aurobindo or you can study Professor Kashyap. He has written not only many texts, he has also written semantics of Rigveda mantras. So where he analyzes all this deeply. The second word I take is Ashwa. Everyone knows Ashwa means horse. But Ashwa also is used to use life energy. And you get more energy. So Ashwa is a strong animal. So Ashwa as the external meaning, but it provides energy in the spiritual sense. The third word I have chosen in the book written, all these are written in detail. This is only an explanation that will help you to read this chapter more easily. The third word is Adri. Adri means hill, Adri mountain, hill. But it is used in a spiritual sense to indicate the inconscience, that is ignorance, inconscience, and all that. Hill. It is a what they say, jadam. It does not have much in there. So it is used to refer to inconscience or ignorance. And the fourth one is Apa. Apa is water. That is the external meaning. Most people who know Sanskrit or many Indian languages use the word Apa for water. And the spiritual meaning for that is the divine energies that flow from heaven or from the Tadegam to earth, that people can accept, can direct themselves, and one become more energy like that. And the fifth one is Nadi, river, and river is flowing water. So the spiritual meaning is flowing current, flowing energy. And the last one, Grita. Grita usually is taken as ghee, but it is also your clarity of and all that. So I will just now take you to a little bit more further. How did Aurobindo, I don't want you to simply accept what I say, to give you a brief thing. You have to really read Aurobindo's works and Professor Kashyap's work, but I am aiding, my book is to aid you why you need to look for the spiritual meaning. Gau is a keyword that occurs in about 900 mantras out of 10,552 mantras in Rigveda. And there are also recurring phrases connected with Gau, like the loss of Gau, the recovery of Gau. Many of those things are used. Then there are words like Gavyanta to indicate aspirants for knowledge or light. So various ways connected with Gau, over 900 appearances are there in the Rigveda. Even in classical Sanskrit, for example, or even in our daily usage, there are words beginning with go or gau that have meaning that are not just connected with the four-legged animal. For example, Gopura. You have all heard, when I say Gopura, you will connect it with a temple, the entrance to the temple, or a temple top, the front entrance that with the sculptures, that is a Gopura. So the word go comes there, but no one translated this is cow, Kaupura. That is not the meaning. Gopura means temple top. Then there is a Gojara. It is a flash of insight. Goshti. Goshti means a place of learning. Veda Goshti, a group of people chanting Veda, is a place of learning. Learned people chanting is called Veda Goshti. And a more common word that most of you may know, especially Indian people, the ladies may know, the name Gomati. You see, parents name their daughter Sumati. Sumati is a name that you have heard. Samyak Mati. Mati means mind. So Sumati is a person with a good, brilliant mind. Sumati. Gomati. Gomati, parents did not name her Gomati, saying that she will have a cow's mind. They named her because she is a intelligence, a knowledgeable mind. So the word Gomati has come. So the go is not used for cow, at least in a common sense, all of us can relate. Gomati, not cow mind, knowledge, intelligence. So Gomati, I want my girl to be an intelligent, knowledgeable girl. So I call her Gomati. So certainly Rigveda mantras, these are all revealed mantras. Revealed mantras, whenever it refers to Gau, is not going to refer to a four-legged animal. That is what Sri Aurobindo says. And Professor Kashyap's book, Semantics of Rigveda, he has a description in 20 pages, pages 156 to 177, on the study of the mantras with the word Gau. And Sri Aurobindo laid down a guideline only by examining all mantras that use the specific word. So if there are 900 mantras in Rigveda, before you assign the meaning for this word, you have to ensure that in all these 900 mantras, this chosen meaning for that word will make sense. So if Aurobindo has selected Go for knowledge, ray of knowledge, he uses, and then he combines both and says Gyau as ray cow, ray for ray of knowledge, among the various meanings, and the word is suitable for all these mantras, then he selects that as the spiritual meaning. Now, I just took this word and gave you meaning. Now I will take a few passages to show how the translation of external meaning of Sainacharya, the English translation of Miller, Max Muller, Wilson or Griffith, and the spiritual meaning translation of Sri Aurobindo, that is followed by Professor Kashyap to translate all the mantras, how that varies. So first, there is a passage in the Rigveda Mantra 1.7.3, Gobihi Adrim Airayat. 3 words, Gobihi Adrim Airayat. Now, Go is translated as cow or water. Sainacharya has translated Go, cow or water. Spiritual meaning for Go is always ray of knowledge. Adri is hill, is the meaning. Sainacharya uses the translation cloud. Airayat means destroyed. Airayat word means destroyed. So the word Gobihi Adrim Airayat, that is a passage in the Rigveda. Now, translation 1, if you take the spiritual meaning, Gobihi with the knowledge, Adrim Airayat, they refer to Indra here. Indra destroyed the forces of ignorance with knowledge. That is the spiritual translation of Gobihi Adrim Airayat. Whereas Sainacharya translates Indra, again refers to Indra, so Indra is implicit here, charged the clouds with water. So for Gobihi, Sainacharya has used the word water. From cow, where did they get the water? we also have to understand that Sainacharya was primary. Sainacharya studied in Sringeri Mutt. So both mutts, Sainacharya is almost a next to God because his brother was the pontiff. He has studied there and he became the prime minister of Vijayanagara Empire. And he organized. You see, Sainacharya did a great contribution. Please do not understand. Please do not misunderstand. I also respect him very much. Sri Aurobindo respects him very much. Kashyap respects him very much. Without Sainacharya's translation. But Sainacharya assembled a team of 100 and more Vedic and Sanskrit scholars. And one scholar translates. Sanskrit has different meanings. Sanskrit words have different meanings and different others translate, and there is no cross-checking and all that. So Sainacharya's translation is Indra charged the clouds. Of course, Indra is connected with the clouds and all that. You see, but the Rigvedic Indra has the status, all the Rigvedic devas are pure forces of light, Div. Based on that only they have been given. And Indra had almost the status equivalent to Vishnu in Rigveda. That's all in chapter, when I come to when I discuss chapter 7. Then Griffith translated Indra, Airayat, smashed, destroyed or smashed. He uses the word Adrim, hill. Then he for getting the cows, Gobihi. He even translated the instrumental case of the word Gobihi. Gobihi, with go, you can say. At least Sainacharya translated correctly, with water. He gave the word go as water. And the spiritual meaning, Indra destroyed the forces of ignorance with the knowledge. That is the spiritual meaning of Gobihi, Adrim, Airayat. So Griffith translates, Indra smashed the hill for getting the cows. First of all, the for Gobihi does not mean for getting the cows. So, and Aurobindo says, and I have quoted it from Aurobindo. Kashyap has quoted it in his book. I have quoted from Kashyap and Arvind. He says, it is difficult to understand the translation 3 of Griffith. How can one save the cows by smashing the hill? Don't you think the cows also will be destroyed when you smash the hill? And Aurobindo says, translation 2 may be okay. That is Sainacharya's translation. Indra charged the clouds with water. So he said it may be okay. One who does not know that is the word. Charge, the sun, the water evaporates and becomes cloud. But if he says Indra charged the clouds with water, that translation may be okay. But where is the wisdom on that line, on that Sainacharya's line? So there are many such passages. I'll take one more because I don't want to spend too much time. I have to cover a lot. I'll take one more. There is a mantra 1.4.2, the fourth sutta, that is the first full sutta of Indra, where that's a mantra in praise of Indra, to invite Indra. And the phrase is Goda idrevado madaha. In fact, this fourth sutta for Indra, I chant every day, so I can tell you, Upanas savanagahi somasya somava piba Goda idrevado mada. So we are only going to take the Goda idrevado mada. I'll give you the full meaning and all that when I discuss the Vedic gods and the Veda mantras in chapters 7 and 8 later. So let's take this small passage. Goda idrevado mada appears. Now, the spiritual meaning is Goda is knowledge giving, because spiritual meaning go, ray of knowledge, every word, go, all the 900 words. Aurobindo uses the meaning knowledge, ray of knowledge. The Goda idrevat. Revat means increase. The increase in Indra, in his rapture, is knowledge giving. That is the spiritual meaning. Indra, Upana Savanagahi. Oh, Indra, come. I have the Soma. I'll discuss Soma later. Somaseva, you are a Soma drinker, you come. Because why? Rishi thinks once Indra comes, spiritual transaction will go on, divinizing will go on. Once Indra comes to you, what else you need? So that is a praise of God. Hey, Indra, come. I have prepared the Soma. Once you come, I will get to this spiritual transaction also. That is the context in which this mantra comes. That is the context in which you chant this mantra to invite Indra. But Sainacharya, using external word meanings only, translates as Madaha, Goda, Id Revato, Madaha. Revato has also increased, so he translates Revata as a wealthy one, and Mada as intoxication. So Sainacharya translates, yes, the intoxication of you wealthy one is Goda, cow giving. So Sainacharya means two things. One is that someone who is intoxicated gives away his stuff, right? So Indra has a lot of cows, cow giving. So your intoxication, so we want to intoxicate you. That is the meaning of the, and that is, and Griffith also reads that. And this has not only does not make sense, it has no wisdom. So this is how Griffith and Saina translated and left it there. That is the intoxication of you. Goda Indrevato, Indra Revato. Revato is increase something. You can say wealthy one also. Wealthy. You wealthy one, the intoxication of you, Goda. Da means dadadi. So go cow. So is cow giving. That is so one who reads that. So even Saina's translation itself, external meaning does not make sense. So if Indra is intoxicated and he gave a cow, so what? There is no wisdom in that one. And why should it appear in the revealed text? That would be the questions among people to abandon the study of Vedas, adding reason. But the Western authors did not leave it simply there. Sainacharya left it without any comment. Western said, this has no meaning, this has no wisdom, they concluded. So they added the skepticism of their own. So Muller, Wilson and Griffith are not just translators. They are publishers of their work with a substantial part of it is translation and small doses of skepticism. That is in that one. And I will not, in a sense, these are all due to hindsight because Aurobindo has explained all those things. So there are more to it. We will come back to as we go. The spiritual meaning can also be used now I want to move on to symbols and symbolism. What are the symbols and symbolism? Even the spiritual meaning itself, the go can now be used as a symbol to communicate two different meanings. One meaning is the external meaning of cow, other meaning is the external meaning of thing. So that is one way. But symbols are also there in the symbolic battles between Devas and Dasyus. Dasyus, remember, these are not physical battles, these are symbolic battles. Symbolic means the Dasyu are the powers of darkness. They contribute to what I say, in essence, you can imagine when we have more of any of the Shatribhus, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Madhamatsarya, then we say we are taken over by Dasyus. When we have more sattvic nature thoughts, we want to help others, we want to give away charity, then the Daivik aspects are there. Of course, chapter 16, Bhagavad Gita, Daiva Asura Samvat Vibhaga Yoga. It discusses what are the characteristics of Daiva and Asura. It doesn't mean Devas and Asuras or Devas or Dasyus. It is all about us. We ourselves go through all those things. So you can use that. So Devas come and overpower. So if you have done spiritualize and all that, then that their effects will come, and that will reduce the dasyus in you. So that is another way symbolic. And I will also give another meaning, another popular mantra that we chant at the end of every puja. Swasti prajabhya paripalayandam nyayena margena mahim mahisha go brahmanebhya shubhamastu nityam loka samastha sukhino bhavantu. This is a mantra that we chant at the end of the puja. And this is caused a lot of harm to the Brahmins who chanted these mantras also, because Swasti Prajabhya Paripalayandam, let all people be protected with Swasti. Swasti means your original state, be in a happy state. Nyayena Margana means let our rulers rule with a proper dharmic ways. Go Brahmanebhya Shubhamastu. The go, there is knowledge. And the Brahmana again is not the caste Brahmin. Brahmana is the one who is proceeding to Brahma, the Brahmacharya, someone who is charity towards Brahma. Brahma means always Vedic word, Vedic mantra. So, go Brahmanebhya Shubhamastu Nityam does not mean let all Brahmins get Shubham and all others. No. All our mantras say Naha, Shanno Mitra Shamvaranaha, Naha. For all of us, please bring Sham, Mitra Varana, give us all of us Sham. So what we say is that this Go Brahmana Vishnuvastu, these are words. So not only by the naming of Gomati, we are using Go for knowledge, not for cow. People who know that it is with that intent, the parents have named the girl as Gomati. So all these, it is colloquially. And another symbolism that we say is the Rishis have said that whenever, if they got any negative thoughts, then Rishis will say, oh, the sun has not risen. My inner sun has not risen today. Why? Because once there is light, the darkness will go. So they are using that indirect form or symbol. But the English translators took such references of Rishis and say, Rishis don't know anything, they are illiterate, they are nomads. Because he said, hey, Rishis do not even know this basic fact that sun will rise every day. That is what the English translators are telling those Rishis, who is actually referring. And we also know that Lakshmi and Saraswati won't stay in the house. What they refer to is, if Lakshmi is the goddess providing wealth and Saraswati is the goddess providing intelligence, usually the case, one is either concentrate on wealth and rich becomes richer, they have become wealthy. Another wants to study, ends up college professors. I am not saying college professors are not rich, but generally college professors are devoted their life to research and study. So we say, these are all symbols, symbolic meaning, but many of our English translators are not were not aware of that, and all those we ended up in those translations. Now, with this, I have covered 3.1 and 3.2. You can read that. And section 3.3, I basically provide various reasons how the study of Veda did not proceed. That again are easy read. I'm not going to spend too much time. On those, but just a couple of points I want to say is that Veda books were not available. Whether you know Sanskrit, even for people who know Sanskrit, they cannot read and understand what the Veda says because the books themselves are not available. Why books were not available? Not enough people to buy. So the publisher is not going to publish that. Leaving aside the fact that it all considered to be secret, you need a lot of understanding. It is very complex, so you cannot understand. That is on the other side. Then the teaching was done only through parshalas to members of the higher varnas, and the boys are sent after their Upanayana. So for various causes, and then there were other things. So you can read 3.1 through 3.9, that completes chapter 3. Now I go to now I go to chapter 4. Next. Yeah, okay. No, okay. On chapter 4, I discuss the relevant Veda publications for current understanding and practice of the Vedas. You see, my purpose is to start from the Rishi period, 6000 BC or earlier, to our current. So we are, and I want to move on to practice. So how do we connect the Rishis and the Veda mantras and Veda samhitas that we got? How we are doing the practice? What is the connection? What is the lineage by which we got into this, where we are? And chapter 4, there is a figure 2. Those who have read the book, or you can read the book later. In chapter 4, there is a figure 2. Of course, in chapter 1, there was chapter 2, there was a figure 1 that gave the important dates and the publications. And in chapter 4, there is figure number 2. There 5 key publications are identified. So in other words, in chapter 10, I put all together into 10 developments from Vedavyasa's classification to in post-Vedic period that took place from 3000 BCE to current. So from the 10 in chapter 2, I'm now moving over to the 5 in chapter 4. And by the time I get to chapter 7, it will become 1. Aurobindos and Kashyaps, 2. The same thing, that is the direction I want to take you. So what are these 5? If you look at figure 2 in chapter 4, you will find there are Jaimini's Purva Mimamsa Sutras and Shabari Swamin and Kumarila Bhatta contributions in the 5th to 7th century CE. Jaimini itself is 2000 or 1500 BC or even 3000 BC time. Then the second publication of importance is Saina's word by word meanings, 14th century CE. And the third one is the English translations of Max Muller, Wilson, and Griffith in 19th century. The fourth one, I have identified the Bhashyas on Upanishads from Adi Shankara, the Advaita Bhashyas, and Vishishta Advaita Bhashyas, Madhvajaya's Bhashyas. So generally it is said in 9th to 13th century, based on the fact that Shankara was 788 to 820 of Sringeri Mutt. But if you take the 509 BCE to 47 BC, then you can say this may be even older Shankara Bhashyas. But whatever it is, those Bhashyas went up to 13th century BCE. And then the fifth one, Spiritual and Psychological Meanings of Veda Mantras by Aurobindo, Kapali Shastri, and Kashyap. I want to make one important statement about this, because Aurobindo's publications, even though he published his ideas about spiritual meanings in his magazine, Arya, from 1914 onwards, until he passed away in 1950, he did not publish, he did not want any of his books to be published. Most of his books are published posthumously after 1950 by the Pondicherry Aurobindo Ashram. And another attendee had sent me an email to say that the Aurobindo that I am talking about is the same Aurobindo who has established his ashram in Pondicherry. Of course, he came to Pondicherry. He's from Bengal. He came to Pondicherry. We know the reasons in 1910. He was in 1907 charged with the treason. He was lucky to be, the judge said that there is no evidence, let him free. Then Calcutta was the center of the British Empire. So he left Calcutta and came and settled in Pondicherry, thinking that he will be free. But even though that was under the French were having them, and even though French and English were fighting for ownership of land, their intelligence agencies collaborated. So Aurobindo moving from Calcutta to Pondicherry did not help him much. He was still under being watched and trailed and all that. But he is such a yogi and visionary. So he contributed his thing. So none of his works were published. So you have to understand, none of his works came out in book form until 50s or 60s. Kabali Shastri joined Aurobindo in the 1940s. He wrote some of Aurobindo's Sanskrit publications translated into English. So that, I mean, English publications of Aurobindo into Sanskrit so that Sanskrit Pandits could understand. But and he translated some Rigveda mantras. He passed away in 1953. And Professor Kashyap was at Purdue until 1998. He retired in 1999. He established a Sakshi in Bangalore. So all these publications by Kashyap based on Aurobindo's guideline was from 1999 to 2014, 15-year period. And the dissemination started only after 2014 afterwards. So in a sense, this spiritual and psycho ideas still is not given as wide a publicity as it can be given. And that is one of the reasons for my writing the book and for, to promoting this book. Even though many scholars knew, and many of them have not accepted. Radhakrishnan, Dr. Radhakrishnan, our vice president, was a scholarly man, a philosopher. He knows, he has written books on principal Upanishads, but he did not accept Aurobindo's things. And neither our Mutt, Shankara Mutt, or Sringeri Mutt has accepted his publication because they are in the Vedic practice, and these publications, Jaimini's Purva Mimamsa, Saina's word-by-word meanings, are the two publications that are the basis for all ongoing. The third one is the English translation, and the fifth one is the spiritual and psychological meanings of Aurobindo, Kabali Shastri, and Kashyap. That we will be covering in part 2. But the fourth one, Bhashyas on Upanishads, this is not a lecture on Upanishad, even though I have added a chapter and I will discuss it in the next class. That is only to provide an overview so that someone who reads this text will get an overview of all scriptural texts. But there are a lot of Vedantic lectures. You can listen to those lectures. I will point out certain points on the Upanishads that is in the next class. But so I will be covering in chapter 4, I want to concentrate on 1, 2, 3. The Jaimini's Purva Mimamsa Sutras, along with Shabari Swamin's and Kumarila Bhatta's works, and Sainacharya's work. We have variously talked about Sainacharya, but we want to spend too much time on the Sainacharya's works, and the third on the English translations. Now, Jaimini's Mimamsas, Mimamsa Sutra, Purva Mimamsa Sutras, the Jaimini stated the correct chanting of the Veda mantra and the correct conduct of the yajna will produce the phala or fruit from the yajna, such as long life, prosperity, having children, good children, knowledgeable children, sons, place in heaven, all those aspects, Jaiminis. Now, not even though Purva Mimamsa sutras are sort of put down in the narrative, Shaddarsanas, the fifth darsana is Purva Mimamsa sutras, and sixth one is Uttara Mimamsa Upanishad, and all the emphasis on studying because Upanishads are philosophical texts. We will come back to that next class when we discuss. So the Purva Mimamsa is not given much credit and even perhaps viewed a little bit negatively. But we must understand that in my first lecture, I said the Rishi period, in the Rishi period had initiate disciples. Initiate disciples means the skilled people who have the skill, who have the intellect, who have the discipline to do the meditation, to understand the inner meaning, to understand the deeper spiritual meanings. Spiritual meanings can go deeper and deeper. So all students, if you have 100 students, all 100 students may not be ready for that. And not only that, when the society progressed and there were other opportunities, all of them are involved in building the society. The building trades, farming, trade, all these aspects, they were spending time and they don't have time to spend all the, to go deeper into the spiritual meaning, etc. So rishis had initiate disciples and the others he called the commoners. And for commoners, rishis recommended outer yajna. And since the same rishis who are teaching the inner yajna and the spiritual meanings is also in charge of conducting the outer yajna, so they will provide the necessary inner meaning and the spiritual meaning to among the commoners who wanted to understand them more. But after the end of the Rishi period, the external meaning only survived and only people who are knowledgeable in external meaning. So only thing is we lost the spiritual meaning, but nothing wrong in the external meaning and conduct of the yajna. And in the next class, I will go a little bit more deeper into the yajna aspects. Now we are going because we have to understand what are the meanings of the yajna. Should we be doing the yajna? My purpose is not only to make you have a course on understand this, but start learning these Veda mantras, performing these yajnas, and whatever benefits that I am going, we will discuss that in these next few classes. You must be benefited by that. So in that context, the Jaiminis Mimamsa Sutras made a very firm statement. Correct chanting of the mantras and the correct doing the yogas, prayoga, learning as well. So the some more aspects about Mimamsakas, they believed in karma. Nitya karmas must be done. Nitya karma, whatever is enjoined for each person, they must do the Nitya karma. If you do not do Nitya karma, you are if you do a good thing, you get a punya. If you do a bad thing, you get the good deeds, get rewards for the good deeds. Bad deeds produce its own reward. So what they took so many strong positions. They did not even believe in God. They said there is no need for God. If you do a good thing, you will get a good result. If you do a bad thing, you will get a bad result. No, nobody in the same manner, Veda mantras say, if you chant this and if you do the prayer like this, you will get this phala, then you will get it automatically. We don't need anybody's help. So they made many, many strong points, but leaving aside all that thing, the key point I want you to understand is that, and this combined along with our first discussion on section 1.3.3, power of mantra. Mananat trayate the mantra. Mantra has a power. It will protect you by your mind. And whatever Sri Aurobindo has said, it will alter your physical being, it can alter the state and all that. So mantra has its own power. So correct chanting, and that is what both all the five Madhadipatis, the four Madhas that Adi Shankara set up, all of them have set up Veda Pathasala, and in the Veda Pathasala, they teach according to Jaimini's Purva Mimamsa, correct chanting, and then after they graduate from there, they go take a correct prayoga under a experienced Vadyar or teacher for 2 or 3 years, just like our graduates do apprentice or practical training under a learned master before starting practice of their own. So Sainaja have published the word by word. So all the Sankaramans and Veda Pathashalas use this. All who study in Veda Pathashala, after that they go under a experienced Vadyar to learn the Prayoga. Then they become the priest. They come and perform these yajnas. So millions and millions of Sanatana followers since Jaimini's time have conducted pujas and yajnas and temple worship with the help of priests and received the benefits and led happy and satisfying lives. So please, this is a small justification. It's one justification that is why the Madhadipatis, Sringeri or Kanchikamagudi, they continue this Veda Pathashalas where they teach the Purva Mimamsa basis and teach all the mantras. So the Purva Mimamsa is the basis for all our current yajnas, and the Sainacharya's word meanings. One of the difficulties, though, is that the 8 to 10 to 12-year period that they teach in the Pathashalas, a boy after his Upanayam at the age of 7 or 9 is sent to that Pathashala, because by the time 20, most of them are ready to get out of the Pathashala. In that 8 to 12 years that they have, these children have to be taught a number of things. They have to be taught some simple math, simple things, how to conduct life and all that. And along with that, they have to learn these Veda mantras by heart. So there is not enough time to explain to them even the Sainacharya's Veda mantras. So most of the Pathashala graduates have not had much training on, even though the Sainacharya's external word by word meanings that help to do to understand the external yajna, even that is not taught in the Pathashalas. The only thing the Veda Pathashalas teach are mainly the correct chanting and how to do the Veda. And there are number of yajnas that described in Rigveda and Yajurveda. Some of them are inner yajnas. I will discuss that when we come to yajna after studying the in part 7, in the chapter 7 and chapter 8. So if we try to find out that this is one of the difficulties that we face, that I will perform this yajna if I'm told, if every step is explained to me and I'm able to better understand what I am doing. The correct prayoga, the correct conduct of the yajna is what the priests are asking us to do. So anything further is they will not be able to provide, and they are not able to provide the meanings. And even if the meanings they are able to provide, especially some of the priests who have learned Sanskrit, and some of them have even have bachelor's degree in Sanskrit or master's degree in Sanskrit, even if they use the external word meanings, some of those meanings may or may not be as clear as possible. So because of those difficulties, the priests who are experts to do the yajna correctly for you may or may not be able to provide you the level of explanation or answers to your questions of what is done. But if you do the yajna with devotion and sincerity per Jaimini's Mimamsa Sutras and Shabari Swamin, the Kumarila Bhatta, the results will be provided to you. And now with the spiritual meaning, the listening to the mantras will bring in some devas, and that will help you to divinize. These are all extra aspects that is not clear from today's yajna. That is where this fuller understanding of the spiritual meanings and the Vedic devas understanding that we are going to have in the chapter 7, 8, and 9. When we discuss those chapters, that is going to help you. The addition, so this whole situation of the Veda practice, this has been going on from how many questions here?
5, 6.
Yeah. So I'll try to wrap up in another 5 minutes. There are 5 or 6 questions I would like to take. This whole Vedic practice that we have done is all these years up to 19th century, 18th century, let's say. In some level, it went on in India. In fact, even many places, Vedic education and Gurukula went on up to 8th and 9th centuries. But from, as you know, from 993 or so, when Muhammad Ghazni invaded India, the off and on, the Arab attacks, 10th century, 11th century, 12th century, later on Mughal dynasty, then later on the East India Company, then the British colonization, direct administration by British government. All that took a heavy toll in the practice of Vedic and Vedic understanding. Not only we have not those who we have never been taught how difficult the times were. If you read history of that period, leaving aside the heavy taxation, the presence of foreigners, loss of your own trade, many of the raw materials were exported and the finished goods were come as a marketplace to be sold. So all those industries that survived and paid people, all those disappeared. So in such case, all those, and it impacted the Veda practice also, but none more badly, with more negative consequences than this English translation. In a sense, you have to give that for anything, you have to look at the plus side also, because around 1835, Lord Macaulay said they decided to change the educational system. So all the Gurukulas disappeared and English education was the way to get a job. So by end of 19th century, lot of educated people knew English, but did not know Sanskrit and regional languages and English. With that situation and the publications of Max Muller, Wilson, and Griffith came in the 1860s and all that. So 19th century. So the post 1900, It is last 200 years. Last 200 years, people not knowing Sanskrit, all of us have gotten our understandings of Vedas from this English translation. One may ask, what is wrong? They translated it into English. If that's all what they did, it would have been fine. But they added what they felt. Sainacharya did only an external translation. Sainacharya was not critical that our rishis did not know. He extolled our rishis. Sainacharya knew these are spiritual meanings because in the previous century, Madhvacharya has already said, Trayartho Vedas, every word has three meanings, Adi Baudik, Adi Devik, Adhyatmik, and Sainacharya explicitly said, I am aware of the spiritual meanings, but I am exclusively concentrating on the external meanings only. That helps you understand our yajnas, and that is the main purpose of the yogas, of the Vedas, and that is what Purva Mimamsa said. The Veda mantras, and also rishis and Aurobindo extolled the power of mantras. So, retaining the power of mantras, that is why in the Guru Shishya Parampara, the correct chanting of the mantras, and there is almost uniform acceptance that the Vedas that we have are as accurate as when Vedavyasa compiled them in 3100 BCE. So almost for 5,000 plus years, without any loss of purity, without any loss of a character, and I will discuss in the appendix 2, I have discussed the three Vikriti forms and three Prakriti and 8 Vikriti forms of 11 ways by which these mantras were learned, memorized, to ensure that there is no error. So this English translation, on the one hand, helped me. They have translated almost verbatim 90-95% of their publications. But in the 5% of them, they added their skepticism. And hindsight, after understanding the spiritual meanings and after of Aurobindo, studying Aurobindo's Kavali Shastris and this, even today, people who have not read that one, they are swearing by Saina's translation is the only one that we will accept. Because Sainacharya was a great scholar, in addition to organizing 100 scholars and translating. And from 14th century onwards, 1367 also he published. The last 700 plus years, that has been the only source for anyone to understand the Veda meaning. This Aurobindo translated only 3,000 mantras. Kavali Shastri translated only 1,100 mantras. So until Professor Kashyap came, and single-handedly he translated all these 27,000 mantras based on the guidelines. So I want to say two things now. The 3,000 mantras and the guidelines laid down by Aurobindo. Kavali Shastri worked with Aurobindo and he translated 1,100. Some of them overlapped with Aurobindo. So maybe about 4,000 mantras together they would have translated. So the remaining out of the 27,000, if you remove some overlap, there are about 20,000 mantras. So 20,000 unique mantras. So about 4,000 being translated by Aurobindo and Kavali Shastri together. The remaining 16,000 has been translated by this single individual, Professor Kashyap. So you can take it in both ways. How do I know Professor Kashyap? I know Professor Kashyap very closely. He led a saintly life, almost getting up at 4 a.m. until 9:30 for 15 years, every day, 7 days a week, to translate all this. And he's an intellectual. Institute of Science graduate, Harvard PhD, Purdue tenured professor before he was 30. A brilliant intellectual. grasping power and understanding and thoroughness. So I would argue that these spiritual meanings make sense, but the acceptance is not there. All of you read and understand. That is why I'm explaining everything. I want to put everything. Don't take my word. Read the book and then read some of Kashyap's books. Get some Kashyap's books. Then get Aurobindo's books. Read it for yourself and you draw your own conclusions. Then you will find spiritual meanings make sense. So the English translation, if they had only translated and left it at Sainas, we would not have taken such negative branding for the Vedas, and the last 100 years plus people who have abandoned the study. And also not only plus, even our children are abandoning this. And of course, we have come to this country, even India also now, after the globalization in the 90s and all that, life has taken a very different turn. The last 20 plus years, the changing lifestyle, life patterns in India is also. So who is going to transfer this Vedic knowledge, this Dharmic knowledge, this culture to the next generation? And on the other hand, I don't want to get into that. There is conferences that are going on, dismantling global Hindutva. People are, I don't know what Hinduism or Vedic Dharma has done. This is the only Dharma that has not attacked any country. It has not only defended itself from attacks from outside. So what harm they have done for others, we do not know. But just last month, there's a global effort to destroy Hinduism. So we need to open our eyes to all those things. And I am closing this lecture by saying that this translations of them, while we got an English translation, because Sainas is only Sanskrit explanations of Sanskrit mantras up to 19th century. So the last 200 years, these English translations, in a sense, has done a good contribution, because they provided the Sainas translation in English for English learning people all over the world. They provided it. But at the same time, there's skepticism. And I'm sure you and I also would have been skeptics. Hey, what does this mean? We showed, right, the intoxication of you, Saina translating, the intoxication of you, wealthy man, is cow giving. Well, where is the wisdom? So we also may have been skeptical if we were translating instead of the English. And so I don't want to, I'm not saying them on that individual, but the bottom line is, this is where we are. So now for us to understand this and proceed, so that, in my opinion, changed. If we had just only Saina's translation, we would have moved forward and done this. But then, of course, there are the Bhakti movements, the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras for a healthy body, and then at the same time, rise in consciousness was by that Samadhi. Then the Upanishad lectures, Bhagavad Gita lectures, all these things, along with the negative messaging that people may have gotten from this English translation, all contributed to the neglect of the Vedas. But it is time to understand, because it is we now have the information as the rishis had at the end of the rishi period. Then for each of us to understand, now make improvements. If there are errors in what Aurobindo has done or Kashyap has done or what I have written in my book, others, youngsters can learn and study and then change it. That is how knowledge progresses. Of course, so many different versions of all our texts are there, because different authors see slight different meaning. It is possible. But of the intellectual curiosity of our later generations, you see, each generation, my observation is, each generation seems to have higher levels of IQs and consciousness. Our children have higher level of knowledge, and they are exposed to a much more knowledge of society. So they are quickly pick up from youngsters. So the knowledge level is going. In that context, the Vedas with the English translation did the double harm, and no one is pursuing, but we cannot afford to let these Vedas stay with our generation. We have to, see what they say, everything, whether the environment or whatever treasures you have received, try to leave it at the same level to the next generation. Try to improve it if possible. If you cannot improve it, at least don't destroy it. Whatever level you got it, you hand it to the next level. That is what they say. Because of that, I come to close this one by saying that external meanings of Veda mantras alone are not enough, are not sufficient. We need to understand the spiritual meanings. All of you to take more steps. First, to complete these lectures, then go in all directions. Get Professor Kashyap's books, Kavali Shastri's books, Arabindo's books, and other. There are other excellent. In fact, one of the attendees asked me why I have not included Dayananda Saraswati. Dayananda Saraswati, Arya Samaj, were a great proponent of spiritual meanings, slightly different than Arabindo's. So there are many, many works out there. As I told you, it is not the 10 development in my book that's important. I took these 10 so that my narrative of taking you to one level of spiritual understanding will happen. So with this, I close, and Naga.
There are a few more questions since we talked. So we have like 7 or 8.
7 or 8 questions. I'll take as much questions as possible.
Yeah. So question 1 is from Nanda Kishore. Why there are only 3 types of mantras when there are 4 Vedas?
No, the mantras are only, this is the only form they came. This is a question from Nanda Kishore. Why there are 3 types of mantras? These appear in these 4 collections. Each collection, what they are and all that I'll explain in chapter 8. But we cannot say why there are only 3. These are the only 3 forms in which the Veda mantras probably are in the Parame Vyoman. And this is what the rishis got. I emphasize the 3 because of there is a confusion about Rik Sama Yajureva in the Bhagavad Gita and the Trayi Veda. I wanted to point out that we have received only 3 types of mantras. Whether there are more types available in Parame Vyoman that are not extracted or revealed, I do not know. But there are only 3 types. But the matter was organized into 4 Vedas by Vedavyasa. Next question.
Related to this, Roni B mentions Mrugendra Vinod. And he basically says Mrugendra Vinod explains that the application or recitation style of the mantras by Ritviks is Rik. By Hotas, Udvaryas, and Tantriks makes the mantras Yajur, Saman, Atharva. And then he has given a YouTube link. So probably
there is one of the attendees has given a YouTube link. I will share that in this one. But I may say to that attendee whether he put it whatever YouTube reference is putting it differently. I will put it the other way, and I will say all this in my 7th or 8th lecture. You see, the Rigvedic priest is known as Hota. Hota means calling out. In fact, the first Agni mantra, Agnimi Ele Purohitam Yajnasya Deva Murtijam Hota Aram. Hota Aram means Agni is the person who calls the other gods. Hota means Hodavar. So a Rigvedic priest, you see, for any yajna, I think who said the Ronnie B? Ronnie B, I'm sorry to answer this question, it will take me too long. Please wait until the 7th one. But rather than the video, they will hear it from me also. But I'll simply say this: Rigvedic priest is known as a Hota. Yajurvedic priest is called a Advaryu. Samavedic priest is called the Samagana. And the other priest is called the Brahma. Brahma, in any yajna, one person will be asked to sit there as Brahma, one of the priests. So you need to have 4 priests, and under each of these priests, you need 3 supporting priests. So 4 into 4, 16 priests are needed to conduct a yajna. We can't even get 1 priest to get this thing, because even priest are leaving their profession and going to other profession because no one is doing yajnas. So after studying all these Veda mantras by heart, spending all their lifetime over there, they don't have an occupational security. So we are losing even then. So where are we going to get 16? I'll explain all this in a slightly different way, Ronnie, later.
Yeah, so another question from Ronnie. To say moksha talked about by Advains came from Buddha implies Adi Shankara is Buddha's follower and did not give credit to Buddha for that. Every Advaitin starts with giving respects to Badrayana, no mention of Buddha. This questions our entire Advaita Guru Shishya Parampara.
This is another loaded question. My purpose is not to, I only wanted to justify my statement when I responded to the questioners that Rigveda does not mention moksha. Then there are questions. And then what about the Trimbaka mantra? Then I said Trimbaka mantra talks about only do not detach me from immortality, and the cardinal rule, the cardinal message from Rigveda is that all people lead a happy, harmonious life with full enjoyment, with family life, but spiritualize and divinize yourself, follow the dharmic values, rise in consciousness levels, and go to Parame Vyoman. That is the place of immortality. But I added the so what I meant by saying Rigveda does not talk about moksha or liberation is the moksha or liberation concept of the Zen. But I'm not getting into when was Shankara, when was Buddha, why Shankara did that, why Advaita, why what is Advaita. That is neither my, even if I know, I have my opinions on that, this is not the forum to discuss that. We will have enough time to have a separate session on that. Next question.
Next question is from Gaurav Nirmal. You mentioned Aurobindo and Sainacharya take on the inner and the outer meanings of mantras. Aurobindo focusing more on inner meanings. What is your understanding of Adi Shankaracharya, and if he also took a stand on the inner meanings? What was his translation of cow?
This is a question from Gaurav Nirmal. So I have discussed Sainacharya giving external meanings and Aurobindo spiritual meanings. And what about Adi Shankara? I also would like to ask Adi Shankara if I can see, in my prayers and this, if you come to my dream and answer this question, I will find out why Adi Shankara did not translate the Vedas. Whether he has translated, I do not know. I think he was translating Bhashyas for all the Upanishads, and he promoted the Advaita of his and all that. Adi Shankara did not translate Vedas. So please do not bring him in this list. He is a Bhashyagara. He has done a lot of slokas, stotras, whatever he has touched. We consider him as an avatar of God. But so we cannot ask whether he reformed the Hinduism itself, whether it is due to Buddha or not Buddha. There was a decadent stage after Rishis, after Vedavyasa and all that. You know, we cannot get, there is no time for me to get into that. There is so much I have to say. I can give a 1-hour lecture on how we ended up so many things. But to answer this Gaurav's question, I don't think he did the spiritual meaning. So in that sense, you can consider him Aurobindo. He did the spiritual meaning. He extracted the spiritual meaning out of Upanishads. In my next class, I will take some passages and it will not make any sense to you. Just like I showed a passage, this Gobi, Goda Idrevido Madaha. So, and that is where you got, that is where the people got the impression that Soma is intoxication drink. So while this bad messaging has come, and I am trying to erase that. So by taking Saina's translation, I forgot to add that at that time, Goda Idrevido Madaha. In your intoxication, you wealthy one, your actions are cow giving. That is what Sainacharya's translation. That is not the translation Aurobindo gives. Aurobindo gives the rapture. He translates Mada as a rapture. The rapture of you, and you are giving knowledge, spiritual knowledge. That is excellent. Your increasiness. So you come. That is what Rishis have called. And Indra is called Rishikrit. And Indra is known as this. How Indra has a different thing in Purana, that is another story, but it's not time to answer all that. But it is a good question. Adi Shankara has not. Adi Shankara did spiritual meanings for Upanishads. And he reformed this. He made his sloga, the Kanagadara Stotra. People sing even today. And I went to his original place, the Manavar. It is there near my home, about 20-30 kilometers. It is still preserved. They are building a Kanagadara Mahalakshmi temple over there. Those are all at another time, further discussion on that.
The next question is from KGISL Ashok. There is a lot of debate about the approximate date of the Vedas, Mahabharata and Ramayana, 5000 BC versus 12,000 BC. What is your view?
KG Ashok is raising a question. There are a lot of debate about the dates of Mahabharata, Veda, and he quoted 5000 BC versus 12,000 BC. I want to say that Paramacharya says in our Vedic belief is Vedas existed always. In fact, it exists always in Parame Vyoman. It existed always, and there is a sentence, Yasya Nishwasitam Vedaha, whose breathing is Veda, whose means that Yasya, that we don't know, that supreme. He breathes. Every person has to breathe. That breathing is the Vedas. So as long as supreme is transcendent and immanent, and the permanent supreme who controls the breathing is there, so Vedas are always there. But since your question seems to be between 5000 and 12,000 BC, I will readily agree because I have only said 6000 BC or earlier. So 12,000 BC and all that. But my main purpose to bring 6000 BC is that I wanted to move away from this 1500 BC and 1000 BC. Even today, books are coming out with 1500 BCE by Indian authors and foreign authors. And even some other reviewers who are my close friends who follow the Western authors, mildly has pointed out, are you sure it is? But I want to point out please read the book, Portrait of a Nation by Kamalesh Kapoor. She has read in detail, or read Kalyana Raman, who has done so much work. Our own authors, Kalyana Raman has devoted his life for Saraswati. In this Saraswati river existed, where it went and all that. And Kalyana Raman's work is quoted by Kamalesh Kapoor. I have that. I don't have the book. I have only a Kindle version. The Kamalesh Kapoor says, Kalyana Raman points out, in 6500 BC, this excavation done by archaeological group, Indian archaeologists and foreign archaeologists did the thing. In Mehrgarh, which is currently in Pakistan, they unearthed a lady's bangles and jewelries that is of the 6500 BCE, made in something. I did not follow the remaining details. And she quotes Kalyana Raman. He quotes Jerige. Professor Kashyap also quotes Jerige. In 1980, he published a paper in American Scientist that I have quoted in my book. That he says 7000 BCE or earlier. 7000 BC is the start of the Harappan. And I had quoted Professor Kasanas in my book, who says Rigveda is pre-Harappan. So it can be pre-7000. But my main purpose is to move this discussion of dating of the Vedas from 1500 BCE to 2002. The 3001 BCE, I have also been, another Ronnie B also wrote to me saying that there are other versions of Mahabharata date. But the reason I quote Mahabharata war as 3067 is Professor Narahari Achar, he's in Tennessee, In fact, he has reviewed my book. He has added written a 3 or 4 sentence appreciative remark in the first 3 pages of this. Professor Narahari Achar was a student of Professor Kashyap in Purdue. So I know Professor Kashyap's intellect. I have heard from Professor Kashyap about Narahari Achar. So Narahari Achar used the software and the dates mentioned in Mahabharata, all those dates, what the stars were and all that. And he using the software, the astrological software, the position of the stars, and he has concluded 3067. So knowing, I have not personally met Professor Narahari Achar, but he is the Professor Kashyap student. I have been doing research under Professor Kashyap for the past 9 years, and Professor Kashyap said, Nanswami, take it. Narahari does a thorough analysis. Take this book. Krishna's Mediation, I think I forgot the title of the book. I may have quoted it in that one. So I take 3067, and that comes close to Vedavyasa, everybody in that time. I leave it at that. Next question.
Oh, no, the time is up. Do you want to take?
No. The time is up. I have already exceeded 1 minute. I have to close this prayer. So next class, I will come try to do 5 and 6. Please read ahead 5 and 6. All remaining questions in the chat and other questions you send email, I'll try to reply just like in this one. Let's do the closing prayers. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah. Sarve Santu Niramayah. Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu. Ma Kaschit Dukhabhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.